Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something that's really essential to life as we know it.
Okay.
Natural resources.
Right.
And we're going to be focusing specifically on land, soil, water, vegetation, and wildlife.
Really, the essentials.
Yeah, when you think about it,
Yeah,
it's easy to kind of take these things for granted, but
absolutely.
when you start to dig a little deeper, you realize just how interconnected they are.
Yeah, and how fragile that balance really is.
Right.
We depend on these resources for everything.
Yeah.
And when you start to see how they all fit together, it really changes your perspective.
Well, let's start with land then.
Okay.
It seems like there's just so much of it,
Right.
especially when you're looking at a map or a globe.
Yeah, you see these vast expanses.
But it turns out that only about 30% of the Earth's surface is actually land.
That's right. And even then, not all of that land is usable or habitable.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
You've got mountains,
Yeah.
deserts, icy landscapes.
Right.
You've
Places
got-
that aren't really suitable for people to live or for growing crops or for a lot of the things that we need land for.
So basically, we've got a situation where most of the world's population is squeezed onto a relatively small portion of usable land.
Yeah, it's really striking when you think about it. 90% of the world's population is living on just 30% of the land.
That is pretty incredible when you put it that way.
It is. It really highlights how important it is to manage that land responsibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how do we even begin to categorize the way we use land?
Yeah.
I mean, we need it for so many different things.
Right. We use land for everything from agriculture and forestry to mining and urban development.
Okay, so that makes sense. But how do we decide which land is used for what? I mean, who gets to make those decisions?
That's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of land ownership and management.
Okay.
So broadly speaking, you've got two main categories.
Okay.
You've got private land, which is owned by individuals or corporations.
Right.
And then you've got community land, which is managed for shared use.
So like communal grazing lands or forests that are managed by local communities.
Exactly. And this balance between private and community land can really vary from place to place.
But no matter how it's divided, one thing's for sure, the competition for land is only going to increase as the population grows.
That's right. And that competition can lead to some serious problems.
Like deforestation.
Exactly. When forests are cleared for agriculture or development, it can have devastating consequences for biodiversity and the environment as a whole.
So it's not just about how much land we have, it's also about how we manage it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about some ways that we can ensure that we're using land responsibly.
Okay, well, one approach is afforestation.
What is that?
It's basically planting trees in areas that have been deforested.
Okay.
It helps to restore ecosystems and mitigate the effects of climate change.
So kind of like undoing some of the damage that's been done?
Exactly. And then there's land reclamation, which is where we try to restore degraded land and bring it back to a usable state.
That makes sense, especially in areas that have been affected by mining or pollution.
Exactly.
It's like giving the land a second chance.
Right. And these are just a couple of examples. There are many other ways to manage land sustainably.
So it sounds like it's all about finding ways to balance the needs of people with the needs of the planet.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on to another essential resource, soil.
Okay.
It's something that we often take for granted, but it's literally the foundation for life on land.
It is. Soil is so much more than just dirt. It's a complex mixture of weathered rock, organic matter, minerals, and all sorts of living organisms.
And it takes hundreds of years to form just a few centimeters of topsoil.
That's right. The most fertile layer where plants can grow.
Hundreds of years.
Mhm.
It's incredible when you think about it.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
It does. So how does soil even form in the first place?
Well, it's a fascinating process that happens very, very slowly.
Okay.
It all starts with the parent material, which is the underlying rock.
So like the bedrock,
Exactly. And over time, this rock is broken down by weathering.
you mean like wind and rain and temperature changes?
Exactly. All those things contribute to breaking the rock down into smaller and smaller particles.
Okay, so that's the starting point.
Yeah.
What else goes into making soil?
Well, climate plays a huge role.
How so?
A hot and humid climate is going to speed up the weathering process,
Okay,
whereas a cold and dry climate is going to slow it down.
that makes sense. And then, of course, you've got living organisms in the mix.
Right. Bacteria, fungi, worms, insects, all sorts of creatures breaking down organic matter, like dead leaves and animals.
So it's like a whole ecosystem beneath our feet.
It really is, and all those organisms are contributing to the richness of the soil.
And I know that soil has different layers, too.
It does. If you were to dig a pit and look at a cross-section of the soil, you'd see distinct layers called horizons.
Okay.
Each horizon has its own characteristics, like color, texture, and nutrient content.
So what can you tell me about those different layers?
Well, the top layer is called the topsoil, and it's usually dark and rich in organic matter.
So that's the good stuff.
Exactly. It's the most fertile layer. And then below that, you have the subsoil, which is lighter in color and has less organic matter.
Okay.
It's still important for water storage and root development. And then further down, you have the parent material, the weathered rock.
So it's like a history of the soil all laid out in layers.
It is. But unfortunately, this precious resource is facing some serious threats.
I was just going to ask about that. What are some of the biggest threats to soil health?
Well, one of the biggest is soil erosion.
What is that exactly?
It's when topsoil is carried away by wind or water, often as a result of unsustainable farming practices, deforestation, or overgrazing.
So we're literally losing the foundation of our food system.
Exactly. And then there's soil degradation, which is a broader term that includes things like nutrient depletion, compaction, salinization, and pollution.
All those things can make the soil less fertile and less able to support plant life.
Right.
It sounds like we're in a bit of a predicament here. We need soil to grow food, but the way we're treating the soil is making it harder to grow food.
It is a complex challenge, but there are solutions.
Like what?
Well, sustainable agricultural practices like crop rotation, cover cropping, and no-till farming can help to protect the soil and improve its health.
So finding ways to work with nature rather than against it.
Exactly.
Well, that brings us to another vital resource that's essential for life: water.
Absolutely.
We all know we need water to survive, but I have a feeling there's more to this story than meets the eye.
There always is. For starters, Earth may be called the blue planet, but only a tiny fraction of all that water is actually available for us to use.
Really, I always pictured Earth as this giant water balloon with plenty to go around.
That's a common misconception. The vast majority of Earth's water is salt water in the oceans.
Okay.
And of the fresh water that does exist, much of it is locked away in glaciers and ice caps or deep underground.
So we're really only left with a small amount of readily available fresh water.
That's right. And that has to meet the needs of billions of people and countless ecosystems.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. And the demand for fresh water is only going to increase as the population grows.
And with agriculture and industrialization, too.
Exactly. And this is leading to water scarcity in many parts of the world.
So in some regions, it's a seasonal problem linked to drought.
Right.
But in other places, it's a chronic problem caused by over-extraction of groundwater or the diversion of rivers for irrigation and other uses.
Exactly. It's like we're slowly draining the well.
So what can we do about it? How can we
Right.
conserve water and ensure that there's enough for everyone?
Well, there are a lot of things we can do, both individually and collectively.
Okay, like what?
On a personal level, we can all be more mindful of our water usage.
Right.
Simple things like fixing leaky faucets, taking shorter showers, and watering our lawns less often can make a difference.
I know I'm definitely guilty of letting the water run while I brush my teeth.
We all have our habits. But even small changes can add up when you multiply them across millions of people.
That's true.
And then there are larger scale solutions like rainwater harvesting.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Collecting rainwater from rooftops and storing it for later use.
Exactly. It can reduce our reliance on municipal water supplies and even help to recharge groundwater aquifers.
And what about agriculture? That uses a huge amount of water.
It does, but there are ways to be more efficient.
Like what?
Switching from flood irrigation, which wastes a lot of water, to more efficient methods like drip irrigation.
Right, where the water is delivered directly to the roots of the plants.
Exactly. And then there's treating and reusing wastewater.
Oh yeah, instead of just discharging it back into the environment.
Right. We can treat it and use it for things like irrigation industrial processes or even replenishing groundwater aquifers.
It sounds like there are a lot of options on the table.
There are. It's just a matter of implementing them.
So it's about changing our mindset and recognizing that water is a precious resource.
Absolutely. Every drop counts.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, literally, when you think about it. We've talked about land, soil, and water.
3 essential resources.
So what are your key takeaways from this part of our deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that these resources are finite and interconnected. What we do to the land affects the soil, which affects the water, and vice versa. It's all part of a delicate balance.
And that balance is essential for life as we know it.
Exactly.
So before we move on to our next topic, I have a question for you to ponder. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about how we manage land, soil, or water resources, what would it be? What would be the most impactful change we could make?
That's a great question to reflect on. It challenges us to think about the root causes of the problems we face and imagine a world where we live in greater harmony with the natural systems that sustain us.
Well said. Keep those thoughts brewing, and we'll be back soon to explore the vital role of vegetation and wildlife in this intricate dance of life on Earth.
Sounds good. All right, so we're back and ready to dive into the world of natural vegetation and wildlife.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. It's amazing how we often overlook these parts of our planet, but they're absolutely crucial for life as we know it.
You're right. We wouldn't have oxygen to breathe or the food we eat without them.
That's for sure.
Huh?
So let's start with vegetation. What makes plants so important?
Well, for one thing, they're the foundation of most terrestrial ecosystems. They're the primary producers, which means they convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis.
Oh yeah, photosynthesis, that process we all learned about in school.
Right, and that energy forms the base of the food chain for countless organisms.
It's pretty incredible how they can make their own food from sunlight, water, and air.
It is a remarkable process, but their superpowers don't stop there. Plants also play a crucial role in regulating the water cycle.
The water cycle. How so?
Their roots help absorb water from the soil, which prevents erosion and runoff.
Okay, that makes sense.
And their leaves release water vapor back into the atmosphere through transpiration.
So they're like natural sponges and air conditioners.
Exactly. And don't forget about forests.
Oh yeah, I remember learning about how forests can actually help to create rainfall.
That's right. Trees release moisture into the atmosphere, which contributes to cloud formation and rainfall.
Wow, so deforestation can actually disrupt those patterns.
It can. It can lead to changes in regional climates and even contribute to drought in some areas.
So the consequences of deforestation go far beyond just losing trees.
Exactly. It also leads to a loss of biodiversity.
Because we're destroying habitats for countless species of plants and animals.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of animals, let's talk about the role of wildlife in maintaining a balanced ecosystem. I know they're important for pollination, but what else do they do?
Wildlife plays a much bigger role than most people realize. Pollination is a great example.
Yeah.
Insects, birds, even bats, they all help to transfer pollen from one flower to another.
Which enables plants to reproduce.
Exactly. And that's crucial for the survival of countless plant species, including many of the crops we rely on for food.
I've heard that bees are especially important pollinators.
They're responsible for pollinating a huge variety of fruits, vegetables, and nuts.
So what would happen if we lost our bee populations?
It would be a disaster for agriculture. Our diets would be much less diverse and nutritious.
That's a scary thought.
It is. But bees aren't the only important pollinators. There are many others. And then there are animals that help with seed dispersal.
Oh yeah, like when they eat fruit and then spread the seeds through their droppings.
Exactly. It helps plants to colonize new areas. And then you've got predators like wolves and lions.
Those are the ones we tend to think of as dangerous.
They can be, but they also play a vital role in regulating prey populations.
So they prevent overgrazing and help to maintain the balance of ecosystems?
Exactly. Every creature has its place in the intricate web of life.
And even the smallest creatures like earthworms and dung beetles contribute to ecosystem health.
They do. They break down organic matter, enrich the soil, and help to cycle nutrients.
It's amazing when you think about all these complex relationships happening all around us.
It really is. But unfortunately, these natural systems are facing some serious threats.
Like what?
Well, we've already talked about deforestation, but there's also habitat fragmentation.
What does that mean?
It's when human activities like road building and urban development divide natural habitats into smaller and smaller patches.
So it makes it harder for wildlife to move around, find food and mates, and maintain healthy populations.
Exactly. It's like we're slowly squeezing the wild out of the world.
And then there's pollution.
Right. Air and water pollution can harm both plants and animals, weakening their immune systems and making them more susceptible to disease.
It's sad to think about the impact we're having on these incredible creatures.
It is, but it's not too late to turn things around.
So what can we do to protect natural vegetation and wildlife?
Well, one of the most important things is to establish protected areas like national parks and wildlife sanctuaries.
So those areas can serve as safe havens for species to thrive.
Exactly. And they also help to conserve biodiversity. And these protected areas are also important for research. They allow scientists to study ecosystems and learn more about how to conserve them.
What about restoring degraded habitats? Is that something that can be done on a large scale?
Absolutely. Reforestation efforts are gaining momentum around the world. Planting trees in areas that have been cleared can help to restore ecosystems, sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and provide habitat for wildlife.
It's like we're trying to undo some of the damage we've done.
In a way, yes. But it's also about working with nature, harnessing its incredible power to regenerate and heal.
That's a powerful message. It makes me think about how we often see ourselves as separate from nature, but we're really just one part of this intricate web of life.
Exactly. And recognizing that interconnectedness is crucial to finding solutions to the environmental challenges we face.
Well said. This has been an incredible exploration of the vital role vegetation and wildlife play in maintaining a healthy planet. I'm already looking at the trees in my neighborhood with a newfound appreciation.
That's what we hope for in these deep dives, to spark curiosity and inspire a deeper connection with the natural world.
Well, before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I have a question for you to ponder. Given the threats facing natural vegetation and wildlife, what do you think is the most effective way for individuals to get involved in conservation efforts? What can we do in our daily lives to make a difference?
That's a great question to reflect on. It reminds us that even small actions can have a ripple effect, contributing to a larger movement for change.
Well said. Keep those thoughts brewing, and we'll be back soon to wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of natural resources. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into natural resources.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we've covered.
It really is. We've talked about land, soil, water vegetation, and wildlife,
It's been quite a journey.
and I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's amazing how taking a closer look at these fundamental resources can really shift your perspective.
It's like we've zoomed in on this intricate tapestry, and we're finally starting to see how all the threads are connected.
That's a great analogy. And I think that's one of the most important takeaways from this deep dive, the interconnectedness of it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What we do to one part of the system affects the whole.
Exactly. It's like a domino effect. Deforestation can lead to soil erosion, which can impact water quality, which then affects plant and animal life. It's all connected.
It really is. So where do we go from here? We've talked about the problems and some potential solutions, but what does a truly sustainable future actually look like?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is,
I think a sustainable future is one where we live in balance with nature.
where we recognize that we're not just stewards of these resources for our generation, but for all generations to come.
Exactly. It's about moving away from a mindset of exploitation and towards a mindset of respect and reciprocity.
A future where we understand that our well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the planet.
I like that. And a future where we embrace the principles of circularity, where waste is minimized and resources are used and reused in a closed loop.
So moving beyond that take-make-waste model that has characterized so much of human history,
Right. It's not going to be easy. But I believe we have the ingenuity, the creativity, and the compassion to create a more sustainable future.
it all starts with recognizing that we're all part of this interconnected web of life.
And that our actions have ripple effects throughout the system.
I love that image of a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It reminds me that even small actions can make a difference.
They absolutely can, whether it's conserving water in our homes, planting trees in our communities, or advocating for policies that protect our natural resources. Every effort counts.
It's empowering to realize that we all have a role to play in shaping a better future.
We do. And I believe that the challenges we face also present an incredible opportunity for innovation and collaboration.
Well, this deep dive has been a real journey of discovery for me.
Too.
I feel both humbled and hopeful. Humbled by the complexity and wonder of the natural world, and hopeful that we can find ways to live in greater harmony with it.
I think that's a perfect way to sum it up.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into natural resources, I want to thank you for joining us on this exploration.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope it sparked your curiosity and inspired you to see the world around you with new eyes.
And I hope it's empowered you to take action, no matter how small, to contribute to a more sustainable future.
Well said. Keep exploring, stay curious, and let's work together to create a world where both people and nature can thrive.